So the case he was appealing again was in fact a corruption pact that Nicolas Sarkozy and his lawyer, Thierry Herzog, made with a judge, Mr. Azibert, to try to obtain other information about another affair when he was elected in 2007 for his first time. And in fact, there were like wiretaps, and this in fact came to the appeal, and for the first time, in fact, a French president is condemned at the appeal. So it's quite rare, and in the history of the French presidency, only Jacques Chirac was condemned in 2011 to sentence, but it was suspended, so it didn't go to jail. And here the risk with Nicolas Sarkozy, even if they contest the appeal, it goes to the Cour de Cassation, but it's likely that the judgment will be confirmed and he will have these 3 years of jail.
Yeah, which is interesting. So at this point, he isn't going to be going to jail. He's got to wear a sort of a detector that keeps track of where he is. But this is not over for him.
No, this is not over. In fact, there are 3 years as a sentence. 2 years are suspended, but 1 year, you're right, he has to wear an electronic bracelet. But in fact, waiting for the Cour de Cassation decision, the most important is that his civic rights, for example, will be suspended. So it means that he can't vote, he also can't be elected. So above just the legal aspect of this story, there's a whole political thing where a former French president is not able to vote and also is not able to be elected. And it's very important because at the moment, we don't have any right leader in the French politics. And there is an interesting survey that has been published 6 months ago. Nicolas Sarkozy is still the 4th personality preferred by the French population among all the politics, and the first on the right side.
That is really interesting, and as you say, I mean, it's given Macron this sort of almost no opposition, although there was, some far-right push at the last election. If we look, though, at what is currently going on, there's still a lot of tension in France. This attack on the president's wife, a family member, do you have any doubt that that was politically motivated?
So it's the great-nephew of the First Lady, Brigitte Macron. What is very interesting is also the Première Dame, the First Lady in France, is quite a non-political person. It's not like the First Lady in the US, for example. But for this case, she wrote a press release condemning the attack because it's clearly linked to the protester against the pension reform. So there is no doubt that there is a link between this attack and the pension reform, because also we have to take into account that Emmanuel Macron was in the French TV on Monday, and clearly he didn't give any sign to the population that he will move backward regarding this pension reform.
Yeah, it is interesting. And her family has a very successful chocolate company and shops throughout France. Apparently they've been attacked a number of times throughout his 6-year time as president.
Yeah, in fact, since the Yellow Vest, during the first mandate of Emmanuel Macron, the level of attack and the intensity of attack towards not only the politics, but their families, the houses of their families, the level of violence really increased in France in the last years, and it's very worrying. And just a couple of days ago, there was even the house of a mayor in France that was completely burnt, and this mayor needed to move. And so in terms of political communication, in terms of what you send to the opinion, if a mayor, if a city councillor has to move and has to leave his town to go somewhere else, it means that somewhere there is a failure in the French state to protect, the ones who are supposed to represent the people and the ones who are elected by the people.
How do you explain this rise in violence, this anger? Is it the way Macron is governing, or is there just a bit like we see in America, we see in lots of different places, a great divisiveness in society? There's
a great divisiveness, but also we don't have to forget that the extreme right, who used to have a very violent speech and an ideological corpus which is very violent, increase in the latest French election. 20 years ago, it was 15% at the French presidential election. Latest election was almost half of the population voted for the extreme right. So it means also that this level of violence coincides with the increase of the extremist idea from right, but also from left. Let's not forget also that at the French Assembly, the extreme left is the first opposition party to Emmanuel Macron. And the extreme right is the second party. So it means that if you want to oppose Emmanuel Macron today in France, you don't tap into the classic right conservative or the classic left, the Labour. You have to go toward both extremes. And yes, that could also explain the level of violence, because it begins with speech and it ends with, you know, acts and what we saw in the last couple of days in France.
Which is ugly. As you point out, he's not going to back down. As far as you can see, he's going to press on. What's going to heal this anger? Are we going to see, particularly the Labour movement out on the streets still? So
there's already an appeal for the 6th of June, in fact, which is 2 days before a new bill is examined at the French National Assembly. What's interesting is that it's the center opposition, with the help of the unions, but also the extreme parties, all together, who are presenting a new bill to try to, go back on this.
To counter what was passed.
Exactly. Yeah. And they already plan what they call a day of action, a day of demonstration in the street, 48 hours before this bill goes in front of the parliament. So it won't stop. And also at the head of the left-wing union, which is a CGT, we have a new leader with Sophie Binet, and she has been very proactive. There was not any change in terms of what they want, and basically they want something else. They want to go back to 60 years old as the age of the retirement and not 64. So it won't stop. But what is interesting is that Emmanuel Macron, in his TV interview, almost showed that this pension reform is a detail in his future program. He talked about 2 billion of euro for the middle class people. He talked about the fact that France will form also Ukrainian pilot in the war against Ukraine. He mentioned a couple of other projects, but for him, there is no question. It's done and dusted. So obviously it won't be done and dusted, and we will probably see, it's likely we see in June another wave of demonstration in the street, probably as high in terms of number of demonstrators that we have seen in the last couple of months.
Yeah, very unusual times for France. Great to have you on, Natanael. Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot.